All right, good morning to everybody out there. This is Nick Smith, Director of Technology at JB&A. Listen, first I want to say thanks for taking some time out of your morning or early afternoon or whatever it may be where you're at to join us to have this discussion today. And then second, I want to say thanks to Will Waters here from NewTek. Will is the Director of Professional Services at NewTek, and honestly one of the smartest guys I know when it comes to IP video and live production. So really excited to have him on board today. And we're going to be talking about some really cool stuff. And so what I would say is sit down, get your coffee, pull out your pen and papers, because this is something you're going to want to hear about. This is fundamentally probably what I see as one of the largest changes in how we build a facility and how we move data throughout our facility, and especially in a live production environment. Because today we're going to talk about how to break the cables. So with that, Will, thanks for joining me. Let's start the fun parts.
Nick, thanks so much for the introduction, and again, let me send my thanks to everyone for joining in today. And here at NewTek, we're incredibly excited about the time and situations, everything that we live in and are currently existing in, because it's really an exciting time for the industry. As I'm sure everyone here knows, IP is a big buzzword. It definitely has been over the past couple of years at the major trade shows. There's a lot of information being kicked around and articles being written on what it should be, how to leverage this technology. And I think it's pretty well established that this is the direction that our industry is moving. But there are some different ideas as far as how we're going to get there, what we're going to do, and what really that vision and that future is. Well, to start out, quickly, is just as far as what NewTek is doing. NewTek is in many ways known for a lot of different things. Obviously, 30 years ago there was the video toaster, but we've been doing video on computing systems, on desktop computing systems, since the inception of the company. And various machinations through all of that, or different iterations as it goes. And we've been known for different things, such as the Video Toaster Company, the Lightwave Company, and most recently the TriCaster Company. But I bring all this up to say that there's an architecture system that goes through all of that's kind of important to look at. And there's a timeline that you have on the screen that just kind of shows that. But if you look over to the right side of this, in 2005, we have the launch of the TriCaster, and this is where things really change. Streaming was something that was coming on to the scene, and it was noticed that you could definitely deliver streaming video out to audience members, and that started changing the industry in many ways. And the TriCaster was a device that kind of brought a lot of things together, and it was sitting on a CPU, a standard computer platform, and developed on. And there was a limitation at that time as far as number of inputs. So what we ended up having to do was figure out a way to bring in other sources. You need graphics in your productions. You need more than just those cameras. And we came up with a way to do that via the network connection. And since then, moving on, our first HD product in 2009 with the 300. This just kept growing, and then finally into really how our product line has developed in today, which we have TriCaster, which is really the latest version of this 30 years of building computing switching devices on computing platforms, as well as we have, of course, our replay and instant replay device in the 3Play, and released last year, announced and doing quite well, is the NewTek Talk Show, which deals with Skype bringing into the traditional video production. But that pretty much leaves us into, we can say that we do have some expertise in live video production. We have tremendous amount of systems out there. We know what our customers are doing and how they're utilizing our products. We are definitely known for bringing all those integrated capabilities into turnkey systems, and we do that, and at the core of our business is trying to do that with price performance. And we innovate. We innovate over and over again. But getting back to what I was originally talking about, and what I think everybody's here for, is the IP discussion and where things go from here. And back at IBC in September, we announced a new advanced IP production workflow. And before telling you exactly what that is, again, from a historical standpoint, there are certain paradigm shifts that we have in the industry, and everybody talks about resolutions and 4K and doing different things, and all of that's very important. But when you talk about production paradigms, if you look back to the change from tape-based workflows to file-based workflows, that really made a major impact in the way that we all do production. It allowed for editors to get content in and out of the live production very quickly. It allowed for content sharing. I mean, just there was this ripple effect that really changed the way that even the business was done. And this is the way that we see in the IP basically steamrolling into our industry to be able to do another paradigm shift. So I think everyone here on the webinar is very much experienced video producer, knows production in some way. And there's certain things that we know that how that works. But we started asking the questions, and what if you could basically take any camera that you wanted and have it available anywhere? Now, there are ways to do that now through SDI, through routers and different things. But what a lot of times, if you had to move things around or connect a source from one room to another, or change out a switching device or a receiving device, whatever you have, I mean, sometimes that even required an SDI tool or a screwdriver to build a new rack or make another piece of equipment put in there. So, what if you could actually utilize the network, which most of us, at least I hope, have some type of networking infrastructure available, because that's really how we all connect together and put things, talk machine to machine, and our data and everything already goes to that infrastructure anyway. So NewTek.
Well, let me add to that, Will. One of the things that, this is something that's really perfect right here that you're talking about, because we talk to a lot of schools, universities, large corporations, and they have their infrastructure like you're talking about, which is, hey, we've got a rack, we've got a router, everything's connected, but it's that one meeting, that one event that needs to happen at the other end of campus or the other end of the building, in which they don't have the cables run to. They don't have SDI down there. They don't have, or they're needing to run fiber across campus, and that becomes very, very expensive. So what you're saying is this is where the LAN piece is going to come in, because we know for sure they always have network down there. It's whether or not they have the baseband SDI or fiber. So I think what you're saying is this is that perfect fit to go into those environments to expand their infrastructure.
Well, yeah, Nick, that's very true. I mean, there is a infrastructure that's being built out, but when we think about production, there are certain needs and requirements and how you get from one place to another. So we started asking these questions at NewTek and said, let's take somewhat of this, I hate to use the term, but this is really the truth about it, the Internet of Things approach. Everybody has a cell phone in their pocket that's in some way you can make the arguments connected to every other network device in the world. I mean, whether or not you can actually talk to or not, obviously, technical configurations go through that, but it's possible. If you look at it in the way that that's built out. So, what NewTek did is basically say we are making video products on CPUs, and they're talking this language anyway. We're putting all this together. Let's look at this as a full workflow standpoint, and it addresses that actual need that you just mentioned in the example of the university or the facility that has a network drop somewhere across campus, but they don't have that traditional baseband infrastructure in place. So what we have here is a new innovation, and we call this NDI, or Network Device Interface. And this is a protocol that we've opened up, announced it at IBC in September. And what this is an open protocol that allows for anyone to get the SDK, whether it's a developer, a customer, a competitor of ours. We pretty much say, hey, we were looking and doing all of this, and for the last few years, because we had a need to bring in video to our switching products via IP, we started working or approaching a lot of other vendors in the industry, names like VizRT, Chiron, Compix Media, sports product manufacturers like Graphics Outfitters and Fingerworks, and I mean the list actually ends up being quite long, to the point where it's just like, hey, you can switch or bring into our switching devices via IP. And there was kind of this realization, we already have this done. It's out there. It's available. People are using it. Why not make this open to everybody? Because this ultimately changes the way that production can be done. So this is what NDI is, and effectively it allows for communication between the source device and the receiving device. So maybe, for instance, a camera and a switcher. It's not just a one-way communication, and this is very important because now that you have bidirectional, which is what IP allows for you, you can say, hey, I need your source. I don't need your source. So there's some various things that we can do. We know what sources are being used, and we can utilize standard consumer off-the-shelf equipment, and by that I mean things that are available already to market to actually run and build out this infrastructure. So the NDI protocol also allows an encode in high quality, being full broadcast quality and frame accurate video, and this all happens in real time. So this is new and it's different, and in many ways you could say, well, there's a lot of other things being put out there, but I'll get that in a moment. Just to visualize this concept here. Say, Nick, just like the example that you gave, you did have separate studios in a facility. This could be a campus network, this could be a digital broadcast facility, or it could be, frankly, a house of worship that has multiple rooms for different things. But the traditional way of doing it is you have your cameras, they go into some type of switching device, and I do apologize for my graphical work here. This is set up. I'm not the graphic artist, but basically here your cameras to your SDI into your switching device, and these things are kind of set up in stasis. And if you want to take, say, the cameras from the far right side studio and put them into the far left side studio, you're going to have to, again, get that screwdriver out potentially and change up what you have in your rack, or have the infrastructure to do that. And when you start doing this to different places, this gets complicated very quickly. So what's the answer for that? And I think we all know here is generally you are going to connect through some type of baseband router, and bring all your sources into that router, and have those all out to whatever devices need them. But at some point you're going to add a source, and it's going to max that out, and you're going to get that standard statement, we're going to need a bigger router. So that adds costs and complexity. You can certainly cascade them, but there is a technical limit to how big a cross point can be before you get into enterprise class and authentication, various things. And there's some great products out there that do all of this, but depending on the customer and what they have available, they may not be able to afford it, frankly. So let's look at that a little differently. Let's go back to the original setup here, and let's add in a LAN, and pretty much everything's on a network switch, which for the most part everything's already connected anyway for control, for automation, for various things, or you at least have those drops local and available. So using the network LAN, we can now start to connect things via IP as well as SDI. And so this allows you to conserve some hardware I/O, the devices that you definitely need to work with in baseband, and also allows for those devices that are generating an IP stream through NDI to be available to all of those switching or receiving devices as well. So you can add more sources over IP and then coexist with the current SDI infrastructure that you may have. And as you can see, I'm starting to add more sources on the left-hand side. That's kind of playback devices. I'm using the standard triangle for play, but you have some file-based content all the way on the far right side that are coming into your switching devices here, and we can start adding these without having to completely rebuild and rethink about that center area here. And that's what NDI makes possible. Say we want to add another camera that's NDI capable, and that then goes on the network. And these are available now from each source to each source, because that LAN it circles all of the different devices, inputs and outputs from, say, your far left side studio here can be seen in the far right side studio, and vice versa, without having to go through and change out your rack or do do some pretty serious reconfigurations to get the productions done. So what are our advantages? Basically, we can reduce the investments in the costly and SDI size Ethernet bandwidth. And I'll get in before I. Obviously, everybody can read the screen here, but one of the things that we're showing on all of this is that you can you really increase your versatility, and there are a number of other technologies being proposed, and I've gotten a lot of questions on that, saying, well, what's different about what you guys are doing versus what's out in the industry? Terms like SMPTE 22-6. Sony has a version of IP that they're working with. Evertz is doing some different things. Even the BBC with the NMI from an end user standpoint is wanting to have some requirements to develop in. And ultimately, what we're doing here, in many ways, I would say is complementary to what's going on with those technologies, because they're solving a different problem. Right now, they're looking at taking basically the same workflow paradigm that is SDI based and putting that over an IP switch, which ultimately means that if you have uncompressed video and you have to stack those, you're going to need some very, very heavy investment in what the infrastructure is on the LAN side. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, except for the fact that what if you have a source that you wanted, for instance, you have your NLE that has a capture card that becomes NDI available. That can, if that is on NDI using the local area network, you could throw directly into your control room via NDI. Whereas if you need to do that through some of these other technologies, then you're going to have to make sure that there is a specific networking capable networking design that allows for that. Again, it's a different problem that's being looked at and attempting to solve there. So as far as what the advantages that we're looking at here with what NDI is over standard SDI and that workflow is that you don't have to compromise on what that high quality video is. The thing about NDI is that it does not have a cap as far as what the resolution is going to be. Now, your receiving device would have to accept a 4K if you were doing that, but NDI can pass that along with the protocol. You can create multiple streams to multiple sources, so your router ends up being the network switch or the local area network versus dedicated baseband video hardware. And this does happen in very low latency. So you can do this in a live environment so that basically it's a single field on the local area network. And we have made this open and available to anyone. Again, this is something that we see that is going to change the ability for everyone to have versatility in their productions and tell their stories in the way they need. And this isn't just a technology we're talking about. This is actually a screenshot that I took of our current beta. Probably you'll see this as something that we do. Obviously, we're using it in our products, but this is actually from TriCaster. This should be released, coming up after the first of the year. Don't pin me on a date at the moment, but very, very close in that you'll actually see this in the marketplace. And what this is the input panel from a TriCaster. And we have input 1. And if you look at the source, we can certainly take the baseband video that's physically on the unit, but then below that there's this list of all the various sources that could be available on the network. And at least in our product, we actually give PNG updates of little still images of what actually that source is delivering as well. So this isn't just a technology that we're saying it's coming in the future or a vision or different things like that. This is something that is working, and really, when we have this available, along with the other partners that we've been working with, from a compatibility standpoint, we've already done a lot of work on this. We're basically 100,000 devices are in the field and currently working out there and deployed already. So from graphic systems that have been utilizing our AirSend and now NDI technologies, capture cards will have the ability to basically deliver NDI sources into our switchers or to other NDI capable devices. And of course, production vendors, as you see there, JVC on the camera side, Skype TX, through talk shows, Panasonic, Peza, Wowza, they've all are currently have not only expressed interest but have active development on NDI capable devices. And the thing about this is, from NewTek standpoint, is that you don't necessarily have to have a NewTek product in the mix to make all this work. These devices start playing with each other through NDI. Now, of course, we would love for you to have a NewTek product, but the reality is it's not required. So that's really the vision. I mean, ultimately, switch any source you want to over IP. Access, route, switch any video source anywhere on that network. And ultimately, that's what the vision that we're talking about with the advanced IP workflow. First seen with TriCaster coming up next month, but the expansion is looked at to be exponential, and we're just very interested at this point to see what our customers will be doing with it. And then, sorry, Nick, did you have a question?
Will, then, just to take the TriCaster moment for a second, the impact on the TriCaster is effectively giving it access to more content, right? I mean, giving access to more effectively virtual inputs available to it from the network side rather than just from the baseband video side.
That's absolutely correct. So you can have more sources available, and the TriCaster with Advanced Edition, we've added the number of those that you can have available on the switch. So let's take our 8000 product, for instance. It has 8 physical inputs on the back of the unit. That's the I/O. But you can add 4 more network sources to that. So effectively, you could put a 460 with a TriCaster 8000, and now you have a 12-input switcher. And there is no loss or difference between what's coming in on the network versus that baseband input. The great thing about that is that it's not just TriCaster. You can bring in the VizRT graphic, and it doesn't necessarily have to sit in the control. I mean, there are other advantages for that from a communication standpoint, but here's the reality here. Control rooms eventually could be designed differently. Access to various sources. The NLE could be playing back something that if you needed to take to air. I mean, I don't know if you'd want to do that from a creative standpoint, but from a technical standpoint, there are possibilities.
No, that's huge. And I think that, just the concept of being able to, really expand upon the core TriCaster and saying, I've got additional sources in other parts of my environment or in other parts of my facility, and I want to be able to utilize them, and this gives a roadmap to utilizing that gear. And I think that's huge.
Absolutely, but I mean, even think about it in other areas using NDI. Bolin Monitors, for instance, is looking to be NDI receive. So think about the fact that you could potentially take a monitor, drop it on the network anywhere in the building, and then you have the ability to effectively view any of the NDI sources. So normally you would have to define a router point. You basically have an SDI line, a punch panel, all of these various things. So this really does change up the possibilities of what can be done, not just how it's done.
Yeah, so it's not just about the inputs, it's about the outputs as well in terms of expansion. So that's phenomenal.
Absolutely, and this is kind of what I had. The only other thing that I will say for this is that well, how do we get there? I mean, when you're approaching a vision and doing different things, NewTek, we are prepared to be thought leaders here. I mean, we have been doing this innovation for a long time now, and so the part of the thing that goes in with that is training and services, and we have built up a opportunity there as well. So, whether that's the reseller, whether it's the end user, whether that's a provision to the customer, we are here to help on all of those different levels.
Well, now you're going to need a team on a project like this, right? It's because it is. I mean, let's face it. This is a fairly new concept because, as we were talking earlier, this whole migrating content IP side of the camp isn't necessarily new in terms of the last mile, right? We've been shipping data the last mile, and you guys have been sort of the preemptive, the kings of that in terms of streaming the final project or streaming the output of the TriCaster to the cloud, across the LAN, to different devices. But to migrate everything coming into the TriCaster to an IP environment is new, and breaking the cycle of having to run the SDI cable or having to have that big router infrastructure. This is a new concept, and this is where we need the partners, right? This is where your guys' expertise and the reseller partners in helping clients to navigate this sort of new path is going to become very key to the success of this. But just having the ability to now do this and to to unplug the cable, so to speak, I think is a big step forward in the future of production, because we've always needed those cables to make production work, and now we can add sources without adding cables.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I like it. I like it. Laura, have we had any questions come in throughout this, or is everybody pretty much stunned and shocked right now, going, "Wow, I can't wait"?
You're pretty close. Yes, they're very excited. I do have one question at this point, and just a reminder, you should find a little window over in the GoToWebinar console on the right-hand side of your screen, so you can type in any questions that may have come up for you. So this question is, will this only be available on the TriCaster Advanced software, or will it be available for the TriCaster software?
The implementation of NDI as far as receiving and switching with it is an advanced edition only feature. Now, your TriCasters in their Pro line and everything, they are networked out, so we're already doing generating output sources, or excuse me, output streams, if you will, of what TriCaster or previous TriCaster was able to generate. So that does work in the whole vision and the whole advanced IP workflow. But as far as switching of and receiving of NDI sources, that is an advanced edition only. It will be required.
Okay. Next question. I had a couple more come in. Just LAN, not WAN?
That's a great question, and I'm glad it was asked. This is intended for a LAN, a local area network. Now, what defines a local area network? This means many different things to different people depending on the design and the capabilities of that network. What NDI allows for is the problem we're solving is really in live production. So we're looking at high quality, broadcast ready video to go from device to device. On delivery, that's really a different problem to solve, and as Nick stated before, there are many different delivery mechanisms, and we work with streaming providers, which we continue to do so to do the delivery network. Now, I've had the question asked to me, and want to do some tests about, well, what if I have a closed circuit, for instance, in a facility that's in Chicago, and that has a dedicated network to another facility in New York. Part of the NDI protocol does allow for that type of transmission. However, bandwidth and latency will have to be, it will play a part in that, and that's why a service and consultation may be required. But there's nothing technical to say that wouldn't work, but we are very careful to say LAN versus WAN because the public internet, frankly, you just don't have control over, how the route of the packet takes.
Okay. Next question: what type of video compression is used over NDI?
NDI it's a compression that it's very similar. Well, actually, it's really the same thing that's going on in ProRes or what you would find in DNX HD. It's very efficient. I mean, one of the things that we have done with that is pack some things together. Not to get too technical into the weeds, but effectively you can say that we're looking at about 30 to 50 megabits for a typical 1080i stream by itself. The great thing about NDI, though, is that this is, keep in mind that they're bidirectional communication because you're on a network. So if a stream is unneeded, if it's not being sent to a receiving device somewhere, then that's not bandwidth that's taken up on the network. But from a visual standpoint, the protocol, I mean, it looks beautiful, and we actually had this shown at IBC where we had baseband video split screen with the same source in NDI, and visually people could not tell where that line was.
Okay.
I think so. Will, that's a huge piece right there, and it's something you and I were talking about earlier. Of the other IP-based technologies on the market right now, the amount of bandwidth that they require. I mean, and you're talking about probably 10 times as much bandwidth as, say, a traditional network stream might be, right? Just sending something to the cloud along that lines, right? Because it's a much more robust amount of bandwidth that you're using, but you guys are doing some very unique things to manage the data to not saturate or oversaturate the network. And I think that's something you and I were discussing. I think that's a really key point, that this was done intelligently, not as, yes, we can do this, but yes, we can do this in an intelligent manner that actually makes it feasible to use multiple streams of this going across the network. So I think that's a really strong point that we need to reiterate here, that this is well designed to do live production over an IP network.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And one other statement on it. Compression can be a dirty word in the industry, really, and that's somewhat well deserved. However, the world has changed in many ways. Even in full film, you have movies that are shot and captured in ProRes. So the compression is an acceptable compression. Now, obviously, you have some customers that that may have objections or opposition or raise flags to all of that. And ultimately, I have to say, take a look at it and run it through your devices. And ultimately, you're going to have to ask the question, why do I need to? I mean, why not? So. Okay.
We do have a couple more questions that came in, guys, if you're still up for it here. So is this protocol layer 2 only, or also layer 3?
The protocol we have some different things depending on the implementation of it. Basically, discovery and registration can sit at layer 2. And then it can pass through at layer 2. But depending on how that is, I mean, I don't want to get too much into the technical weeds here, but there are some opportunities that our SDK and API allow for, depending on how the developer wants to deliver information. This also the data to go along with the video stream, so you can do timestamping. You can put side chain packets to go along with it, and depending on how that's implemented, that could happen in the layer 2 or the layer 3. Okay. But yeah, we can cross subnets. That takes a little bit more configuration. It doesn't just automatically work in the way that our discovery and registration are, but it is possible to do so.
Okay. Is the IP workflow like P2P protocol?
Like P2P? No, not really. I mean, if anyone's familiar with Bonjour and the way Bonjour devices act and react on the network, from a discovery standpoint, you're going to be very used to this type of how things are announced. And then as far as the video itself, it's a direct from device to device. So there is no spreading the bandwidth around or spreading processing from machine to machine.
Okay, and that kind of links into these next two questions. What network requirements are there? I'm assuming at least a gigabit link between devices, and also what networking protocols need to be supported by the routers and switchers on the LAN?
Well, that's a great question, and the true answer is it depends. However, in the way that we have implemented it, and we're showing it in TriCaster and with the products that, the vendors that we work with that are currently set up to feed our TriCasters from network source, basically, like I said, you're looking at about 30 to 50 megabits for the full resolution per stream. So as it stands now, take me hard on this, but you can conceivably think about 8 to 10 full high resolution or HD resolution streams on a typical gigabit port. The thing about this is this starts opening it up. If you have a device that has higher bandwidth capabilities, we can start doing things there. But as it stands and how it will go initially, that's where we're looking at. However, keep in mind this. If you're not needing that source on program, you're not using that bandwidth. So, from that standpoint, things become a little exponential. And this is very different from the IP technologies that are currently being proposed, where you basically have to reserve bandwidth for a particular stream of video, regardless if it's being utilized or not.
Okay. And last one here. Since it's a two-way communication, would it be possible for tally and intercom to be carried between devices as well?
Yes, I'm so glad that that question was asked. We actually have this implemented within the TriCaster so that we can send back to the source device to say, yes, you are being used on air, and tally is supported.
Okay, perfect. Well, it looks like that is questions for now. I'm sure there, might be some later, in which case you can reach out to your team here at JB&A for those. Nick and Will, anything else you would like to add?
No, I think we covered this one well.
Yeah, awesome.
Excellent.
Thank you so much, everybody. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, and then as always, reach out to your team. If you have questions, call your NewTek guy, call your JB&A guy. Let's get a conversation rolling with a client. This is a great opportunity to get ahead of this idea and this sort of solution set in terms of going to IP and start planning all of your projects that you're doing now and how they can be better and how we can do more with them. So let's all stay connected on those. Will, thanks again for being here with us. Really appreciate you having you. This was amazingly informative.
My pleasure, and if there's anything we can help out here at NewTek, we are here to help with all of this. So.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, everyone.